Hello everyone, my name is Kiyoteru Tsutsui and I'm the director of the Shorenstein Asia-Pacific Research Center here at Stanford University. Today, I'd like to focus on the election of Sanae Takaichi as Prime Minister of Japan. Well, first, who is Sanae Takaichi? She is a 64-year-old woman representing the Nara Prefecture, where I'm from. She is the first female Prime Minister of Japan. It's an amazing achievement in a country that's not quite known for gender equality. Whatever international ranking you might look, Japan is among the lowest, usually the lowest among G7 countries and among the lowest among democratic countries and developed democracies. She came up through the ranks as the protege of Shinzo Abe. And indeed, Abe was the one who pushed Takaichi to run for LDP presidential election, and she sort of inherits Abe's policy. So she is known as a conservative, even within the LDP party, a conservative type. She comes from a modest upbringing and not from a political dynasty like many of the prime ministers in Japan. She is known to be a policy wonk. She studies very, very hard. She knows her stuff. Part of that is because she is not somebody who would go out for drinks with other party members or other politicians or media people, which a lot of Japanese politicians tend to do. And she would confine herself in her office, in her room, and study policy matters. So she is respected for knowing the policy, even if people might disagree with her policy orientations. A fun fact, she's known to have been a heavy metal drummer and an avid motorcycle rider, although she probably won't have time for that stuff for the time being. How did she rise to power at this time in Japanese political history? Prime Minister Ishiba was called to resign, and after a long process, he decided to step down. Then there was the LDP presidential election on October 4th. And many people expected Shinjiro Koizumi to emerge victorious as LDP president and then become Prime Minister of Japan. But much to the surprise of a lot of people, Takaichi emerged victorious. She worked really hard to make that happen. She and her supporters made phone calls, wrote letters to all the people, LDP members who had votes, and then really made a huge comeback. After October 4th, she had to form a winning coalition to win the votes in the Diet, which would determine the prime ministership. Since 1999, LDP and Komeito has had a coalition that produced most of the prime ministers in that period. But Komeito decided to leave the coalition. So Komeito leaves, and LDP does not have enough votes in the Diet to win prime ministership by itself. So LDP had to find a new partner. So Ishin, the Japan Innovation Party, emerged as a new coalition partner, which makes a lot of sense when you look at their political orientations. But even combined with Ishin, LDP does not have the majority either in the lower house or upper house. So Takaichi's power base looks very fragile, since opposition parties, if they could come together, could block any legislation and even pass a no-confidence vote in the Diet. But Takaichi is situated quite well because she does not have to call election for the next 3 years if she doesn't want to, does not have to call national election. She does have to face LDP presidential election in 2 years, so it's likely that she would call a snap election for the lower house, which was a method that Abe used to perfection to prolong his time as prime minister, and he stayed in office for 8 years. Takaichi is in an advantageous position of choosing when to call a snap election, which will likely be at a time when LDP is likely to win. So she might have a very stable political power base for the next couple of years. So to understand where Takaichi might take Japan, it would be helpful to look at the personnel decisions. So who did she appoint in her first cabinet? On defense and foreign policy, she appointed Motegi, an experienced veteran, as foreign minister, and that makes a lot of sense. What's surprising and interesting is the appointment of the National Security Advisor, Keiichi Ichikawa. That sent shockwaves in the Japanese foreign policy circle. Because the previous person was in that position for only 9 months. Ichikawa was going to be ambassador to Indonesia, which was decided upon only a few weeks ago, and then that appointment has been cancelled, and now Ichikawa is a national security advisor. What does that mean? There are 3 key security documents that Japan has, and that does not have to be revised anytime soon, but these appointments seem to indicate that that would happen sooner rather than later, the revision, which likely will push Japan in the direction of more defense spending, more capabilities, acquisition and development, which is probably to the liking of the Trump administration. That's a national security issue. Then fiscal and monetary policies. Takaichi appointed Satsuki Katayama as the finance minister and appointed Itsunori Onodera as the new chairperson of the Research Commission on the Tax System. This commission shapes LDP's tax policy, which translates into Japan's tax policy for the most part. And these appointments combined indicate that Japan's fiscal policy will go in the direction of more government spending, more quantitative easing, and perhaps even in some areas like food, lower tax rate. The last is less likely, but that's the direction that these appointments point to. A lot of Japanese people are alarmed about the influx of foreigners in the form of inbound tourism and also immigration. And news media tend to pick up those issues caused by immigrants somewhat prominently. And Takaichi appointed Onoda as the Minister of Economic Security, but also the Minister of Foreigners Affairs, which is a newly created position. And Takaichi and Onoda, proclaim that the immigration policy will not be exclusionary or anti-immigrant. They just want to protect Japan's properties from predatory purchasers coming from outside. And they want to keep Japan safe. The perception is that immigrants tend to cause some problems in that area. So we'll see how it turns out. But that appointment alone is an interesting development because that indicates to the public that this is an issue that Takaichi cabinet will spend a lot of efforts and resources on. We'll see how it goes, and Takaichi will welcome President Trump for a summit meeting, and that would be an interesting first meeting between the two as two heads of states. There's a lot of expectations before previous Prime Minister Ishiba met Trump. There were a lot of concerns about how the chemistry might work out, coming on the heels of a great relationship between Prime Minister Abe and President Trump. But Ishiba's relationship was actually quite good. So now we'll see how Takaichi would take to President Trump. Thank you for joining us, and see you next time.